there is some food for thought in these paragraphs of this report for people who have to draft their guidance. Let me move on now. The OECD model. The OECD model obviously does not contain any definition of what is avoidance or not. It does discuss to a certain extent whether general or specific anti-avoidance rules are compatible or not with tax treaties. And in general terms, the answer is yes, they are compatible because they set the factual and legal background upon which the treaty has to be applied. But what I would like to focus on here is two paragraphs. One where it says it is also a purpose of tax conventions to prevent tax avoidance and evasion. Why it is important? It is important because when you have a doubt on how to interpret a provision of a treaty, you probably have to take into account the object and purpose of the treaty. And therefore expressly stating that preventing tax avoidance is part of the purpose of the treaty may be relevant in this respect. And Article 9.5 and paragraph 9.5 of the commentary on Article 1, which if you want to read it this way, may contain a sort of unwritten principle of anti-abuse of double tax convention. It starts by saying you shouldn't think that everything the taxpayer does is tax avoidance or abuse of rights or of law, depending on which doctrine you follow. And then it says a guiding principle is that the benefits of the double taxation treaty should not be available where a main purpose for entering into certain transactions or arrangement was to secure a more favorable tax position, and obtaining that more favorable treatment in these circumstances would be contrary to the object and purpose of the relevant provisions. Here again, for those who have to work on drafting tomorrow, you may see some elements which, from the perspective of the OECD commentary, may constitute a principle of interpretation of double taxation treaties based on the OECD model. And here I say past present, because obviously this language was introduced in the past, but it is still relevant today. Past present, and now I'm moving out again of the technical context and looking at what tax administrations around the world are doing. FTA stands for Forum on Tax Administration, which in 2006 put together commissioners of more than 30 countries in Seoul, and these commissioners issued a declaration. What the declaration says is the following. It says, we are committed to using national, regional, and multilateral initiatives to achieve better compliance with the tax laws, working within the existing framework of bilateral agreements, and if needed, to explore the need for new tools to assist in the detection of international non-compliance. And we have identified 4 areas of work. Why I'm talking about this? Because these 4 areas of work are part of the present and future program of work of the OECD on tax compliance. What are these 4 areas of work? Further developing the Directory of Aggressive Tax Planning Schemes has to identify trends and measures to counter such schemes. This is basically a database of schemes which countries that participate in this work put together and consider that may be relevant also for other tax authorities, indicating the way in which they found out about these schemes, the detection strategy, and the way in which they have reacted to that, the response strategy. I'll come back to that. Second, examining the role of intermediaries, law and accounting firms, financial institutions, in relation to non-compliance and the promotion of unacceptable tax minimization arrangements, tax shelters, weapons of tax destruction, as some people call them. Point number 3, expanding the 2004 corporate governance guidelines to give more attention to the linkage between tax and good governance, 2006. And improving the training of tax officials on international tax issues, including the secondment from one administration to the other. There have been other meetings, work has been going on since 2006, and there have been a number of other communiques, which if you are interested in this topic, I invite you to read. They are all available online. One was issued in 2008 from the Cape Town meeting, another one in 2009 from the Paris meeting, and 3 weeks ago in Istanbul. What was the result of this declaration? In 2008, we published a study on the role of tax intermediaries, highlighting the importance of the role of these intermediaries in making sure that there is the level of tax compliance the government is looking for. As a follow-up to this work on tax intermediaries, 2 other reports were issued in 2009, one dealing with the role of banks. Banks that play a role both as, in some instances, promoters of schemes which are not in line with the view of governments in relation to tax compliance, and also in their role as intermediaries in the collection of taxes and in the provision of relevant information to the tax authorities of different countries. And another one which specifically deals with high net worth individuals. Why high net worth individuals? Because this is a very specific segment, extremely rich people. They move around, they have private jets. They can hire very expensive consultants. And sometimes they can end up paying a marginal tax rate which is lower than what their secretary pays. Governments don't like that. Here you have the link to the full list of publications of the FTA. Present, where are we now? Between then and now, what happened? A huge financial crisis. Maybe Brazil was not that much affected as other countries. But this financial crisis has triggered some reconsideration of the policies which were implemented in the past, particularly from the regulatory point of view, but maybe also from the tax point of view. The need for transparency, the fact that in many cases these regulatory structures which were put in place used the same secrecy and the same devices which were used for aggressive tax planning or tax avoidance purposes. It has questioned also the model of tax havens. And these days, this week, is also questioning the policy of countries having a low tax rate. That's not my personal point of view. I just read it on the newspaper yesterday. Ireland may be in troubles. And one of the reasons may be its low tax rate. So something has changed. And this is not because the crisis was not due to taxation, but taxation should definitely be part of the answer to the crisis. In 2010, there was a meeting at ministerial level at the OECD, and this meeting, through the push of a number of countries, particularly G20 countries, issued a declaration, the so-called PIT declaration, propriety, integrity, and transparency. And this declaration contains a number of points. Point number 5 says the following. Corporate vehicles should not be misused for illicit purposes. Standards of responsible business conduct should be reflected in corporate decision-making.